Imagine for a moment the quiet surface of a respectable life. What happens when a hidden desire starts to crack that surface? How far might someone go, to keep that desire alive, even if it means the ultimate betrayal? Today we're looking into a really chilling story. It's about a double murder planned meticulously that stayed hidden for years. Right in the middle of what seemed like a normal religious community in Northern Ireland, it's this story of an affair that just spiraled completely out of control. We'll be talking about Colin Howell, a respected dentist, and Hazel Stewart, a Sunday school teacher. On the outside, they were pillars of their community in Colin, both married, both with children. Our mission today is to sort of trace how this dark story unfolded, from that first spark of an affair right through to the devastating end and the long, difficult path to finding out the truth. You'll hear how conscience, or maybe something else, finally brought it all into the light. So let's get into it. Okay, so picture Colin, Northern Ireland, a place where appearances, they really mattered. You have Colin Howell, successful dentist, married to Leslie, 7 kids, very active in their church, looked up to. And then there's Hazel Stewart, Sunday school teacher, married to Trevor Buchanan, a policeman, 2 children. Looked like a stable family life. Both families deeply involved in the same local church, a very tight-knit community. And it was through these church events that Colin and Hazel met. And soon, they started an affair, behind their spouses' backs. At first, Hazel felt incredibly guilty, really conflicted after every time they met. But Colin, he seems to have been quite the manipulator. He had this twisted way of justifying what they were doing. He kept telling her things like their affair was God's plan or a gift from God. He even said it wouldn't have happened if God didn't want it to. It's pretty chilling how he used religion like that, isn't it? What's your take on that kind of rationalization?
Well, it's a really potent example of what we call cognitive restructuring. It's where someone twists their thinking to make something immoral seem okay, often aligning it with their existing beliefs. Colin wasn't just lying to her, he was actively building a sort of alternate reality for Hazel, using her own religious beliefs against her in a way. We see this pattern, unfortunately. It shows how deeply held belief can be, weaponized to chip away at someone's moral resistance. It basically numbed her to what she was doing, gave her a twisted excuse.
And it seemed to work. Because once she got past that initial guilt, the affair just got more and more reckless. They stopped being so careful about who might see them. Hazel even started going to Colin's dental office. Apparently they'd have sex there, sometimes even use laughing gas, got really careless. And then, maybe the most shocking part, early on, 1998, Hazel actually got pregnant by Colin. They decided pretty quickly she couldn't keep the baby, so they went to England together for an abortion. And get this, it was the exact same clinic Colin's wife, Leslie, had already been to 3 times. Yeah, the level of entanglement there is just staggering. It wasn't too long before someone at the church found out. The pastor confronted them both separately, warned them, about being kicked out of the church, Hazel losing her job. They pretended they'd end it, told the pastor what he wanted to hear. But they kept seeing each other. So the pastor, realizing this, went directly to Leslie, who was pregnant at the time, mind you, and told her everything. When Hazel heard Leslie knew, she confessed to her husband, Trevor. This led to this brief period where both couples actually tried counseling. But it only lasted a couple of months. Then Colin and Hazel were back together again. Trevor and Leslie weren't blind. They suspected, or maybe even knew, the affair was back on. But they loved their partners apparently and just didn't know what to do. It's almost hard to grasp how they could just carry on after being caught like that. What does that tell us?
It really speaks to how deep the self-deception can go and how boundaries just erode completely. Once you cross that first major line, the affair, the abortion, it becomes a kind of slippery slope. It's not just self-deception anymore. It's almost like a form of, in a way, grooming, where the manipulation makes increasingly bad behavior feel almost normal within that relationship. The stakes were so high already, the fear of exposure probably bound them together even tighter than affection did. Stopping felt almost as scary as continuing.
And that desperation, that entanglement, it led somewhere truly awful. In early 1991, neither Trevor nor Leslie wanted a divorce, so Colin came to Hazel with this just unthinkable idea. He suggested getting rid of Trevor and Leslie. He actually framed it as ending their spouses' suffering humanely, said divorce would be too tough on the kids. That jump from hiding an affair to plotting murder, it's huge. What psychologically allows for that kind of shift?
That's the absolute turning point, isn't it, from moral compromise to to just sheer depravity, the constant justifying, the shared secrets. It creates this warped little world. For Colin, it suggests a really cold, instrumental view of people, like they're just obstacles. For Hazel, it points to maybe a complete desensitization, her moral resistance totally broken down, probably a mix of Colin's manipulation and maybe her own desire to escape her marriage and be with him. The affair was their escape route, and murder was presented as the final twisted step.
Hazel apparently didn't believe he was serious at first. She just couldn't imagine he'd actually do it. But the next time they met, she realized he meant it. And eventually she agreed to take part. Colin then gave Hazel sleeping tablets, told her to crush them up, put them in Trevor's food or drink. The idea was Colin would come over later and attack Trevor while he was drowsy. Hazel supposedly asked, "What if we get caught?" And Colin's replied, "Just chill. We're not going to get caught." They set the date for May 18th, 1991. Horrifically, it was one of Colin's children's birthdays. That night, Colin started his plan. He took a baby bottle, cut it, attached it to a garden hose, then hooked the hose up to his car exhaust to pipe carbon monoxide. Leslie, because they were having problems, was sleeping downstairs on the sofa, away from the kids. An easy target, isolated. Colin turned on the car in the garage, brought the hose into the living room. Leslie was asleep under the covers. He put the tube under the covers, near her head, letting the gas build up. Eventually, Leslie woke up, choking. But she was too groggy from sleep, maybe the initial gas, to fight back properly. Couldn't even get the covers off.
Colin held the covers down. Her very last breath was apparently a call for her little boy, Matthew, who was 6 at the time. Just the cold calculation of it all, using his dental knowledge of the gas. It's not a crime of passion, is it? It feels so planned. What does that methodical approach reveal?
It really points towards traits often seen in psychopathy. That lack of empathy combined with very careful, calculated planning. It's not just evil in a general sense, it's a specific kind of detached, instrumental violence. From his perspective, Leslie wasn't really a person with a family or feelings anymore. She was a problem he needed to solve, humanely, as he sickeningly put it. It shows an extreme disconnect from the value of a human life.
Once Leslie was dead, Colin put her body in the boot of his car. But first, he went back inside and grabbed framed family photos from the living room, pictures of him and Leslie together. Then he drove over to Hazel's house. Hazel had already parked her car somewhere else that night, as planned. She let Colin into the garage. Trevor was upstairs, asleep, likely already affected by the sleeping pills Hazel had given him. Colin reconnected the hose to his car exhaust in the garage, then against the tube upstairs to their bedroom. This time, Trevor wasn't under the covers, so Colin just laid the tube near his head. Trevor started to wake up, probably heard or felt the gas. Colin rushed in. Trevor, weakened by the drugs and the gas, tried to fight him off, but Colin managed to overpower him, eventually holding the tube right in Trevor's mouth until he stopped breathing. So now he has both bodies in the boot of his car. He drives a few miles away to a quiet spot called Castle Rock. And this is where the really elaborate staging begins. He wanted it to look like a suicide pact. He dragged Trevor's body out and put it in the driver's seat, positioned his hand on the steering wheel like he'd driven there. Leslie's body stayed in the boot. But Colin arranged those family photos he'd taken around her, made it look like she was gazing at them as she died. And he wasn't finished. He found a cassette tape and headphones Leslie used, put the headphones on her head, turned the tape player on, like she was listening to her favorite music. Then, the final touch. He started the car and rigged up an old vacuum cleaner part to pipe exhaust fumes directly into the boot. The story they wanted the police to buy. Two heartbroken people who found out about their partner's affair and decided to end it all together. The next morning, about 7 a.m., Colin Howell calls the police, reports Leslie missing, suggests she might be with Trevor Buchanan. Within hours, the car is found. And unbelievably, their plan worked. The deaths were ruled suicides. Colin and Hazel had their alibis ready, stories that didn't quite match up but explained why they didn't know anything. Colin even left a fake suicide note, supposedly from Leslie. He really tried to cover every angle. But you mentioned earlier that these perfect plans often have flaws. Even without physical evidence at the time, what kinds of things might have raised red flags?
That's a really interesting point. Even if the physical scene looked plausible back then, the narrative itself is almost too neat, isn't it? Psychologically, when a story ties everything up so conveniently, especially in such a dramatic way, it often triggers a sense of unease, a gut feeling that something's off. It's like the opposite of the CSI effect. The sheer perfection, the almost theatrical staging, can paradoxically make it feel less credible. Plus, the immense pressure of keeping that lie going for years. It almost guarantees small cracks will eventually appear in the story or their behavior. Human intuition often picks up on those inconsistencies, even if proof is lacking.
And it seems it happened. Despite the official ruling, a lot of people in town, even some police, apparently had doubts. It just felt too tidy. But with no proof, nothing happened. Colin and Hazel were banned from the church, though. The affair was seen as the catalyst for the suicides. So the whispers continued, but that was it. For Hazel, the guilt became unbearable. It affected her so much that intimacy with Colin was apparently only possible if she was sedated. Reports say Colin would actually inject her with drugs from his dental practice so she could cope. Eventually, the affair just kind of fizzled out. They drifted apart. No big breakup, just faded away. And then they both moved on, remarried, had more children with their new spouses. It really seemed like they might have gotten away with it. But secrets like that, they have a way of festering. In 1998, 7 years after the murders, Colin Howell confessed everything to his new wife. She was, as you'd expect, absolutely horrified. But they had a child, a life together. She promised to keep his secret. Then almost 10 years later, around 2007, Colin's life started falling apart. He'd gotten about £400,000 from Leslie's life insurance. He got involved in some get-rich-quick scheme and lost £350,000 of it in just 6 months. He ended up selling dental practices, even defrauding patients out of hundreds of thousands for treatments he never provided, just desperately trying to recoup the money or chase the scam. And then, tragedy. His son, Matthew, the same son Leslie called for as she died. He died in an accident in Russia, fell down a stairwell. He was 22. Colin was completely shattered. He became convinced these weren't just random events. He saw them as divine punishment for his sins. He believed the suffering wouldn't stop unless he confessed. It seems those events, especially losing Matthew, were the trigger. Is that a common psychological pattern for deeply buried guilt to finally erupt like that?
Oh, absolutely. It's a powerful example of what psychologists might call existential guilt finally breaking through. While some individuals, perhaps those with strong psychopathic traits, might compartmentalize forever, for many, the psychological weight of such a secret is enormous. Major life crises, financial ruin, the death of a loved one, especially a child, can completely overwhelm the defenses and rationalizations they've built up for years. It's like the dam breaks. The mind can't hold it back anymore, and this sense of cosmic justice or needing to confess to stop the perceived punishment becomes overwhelming. Confession feels like the only way out.
And that seems to be exactly what happened with Colin. It was his breaking point. He decided he had to confess. He went to the police. But interestingly, before he confessed the murders, he first told his second wife about other betrayals. He admitted he'd been sexually assaulting patients under sedation at his dental practice and about the financial scams. Only after admitting that did he confess fully to murdering Leslie and Trevor, laying out the entire horrific plan. So with Colin's confession, Hazel Stewart was arrested. She denied everything, basically. Claimed she only went along with it because she was terrified of Colin, feared for her life and her kids' lives if she didn't comply. But Colin Howell testified against her. He insisted she was fully involved right from the planning stages through to helping destroy evidence afterwards. In the end, the verdicts came. Hazel Stewart pleaded not guilty, but the jury found her guilty. She got life in prison, minimum 18 years. The judge was quite scathing, pointing out all the chances she had to stop it or report it. He specifically said she could have called the police, locked her door, refused to let Colin in, shouted for help, turned the car off. But she didn't.
Because the judge concluded she wanted Trevor dead so she could be with Colin. He saw her as equally complicit. Colin Howell pleaded guilty. He got life with a minimum of 21 years for the murders, plus another 5.5 years for sexually assaulting his patients, and he lost his NHS pension. It raises that really difficult question, doesn't it? How do you weigh fear against complicity in something so terrible?
It's one of the hardest judgments in law and really in life. The judge's words to Hazel really underscore that legal and moral expectation. If you have clear chances to prevent a terrible crime, you're expected to take them. While genuine, paralyzing fear can be a mitigating factor, in Hazel's case, the court clearly felt the number of opportunities she had, combined with her potential motive wanting to be with Colin, tipped the balance from victim of coercion to active participant. It shows that inaction, especially when it directly enables murder, can carry immense legal and moral weight.
This whole disturbing story was later turned into an ITV drama called The Secret. It brought the case to a lot more people, but it's worth remembering that dramas often change things for, dramatic effect. Some of Colin and Leslie's children actually spoke out afterwards, saying parts of it weren't accurate or were over-dramatized. It's just a good reminder, really, when you're interested in true crime, to always try and find the detailed facts behind the dramatization. So today we've walked through the really unsettling case of Colin Howell and Hazel Stewart, A story of betrayal, cold-blooded murder, a cover-up that held for nearly 2 decades, and then this powerful, unavoidable reckoning driven by guilt and tragedy. As you think about this story, maybe consider what really eats away at a person more. Is it the act of committing the crime itself? Or is it the long, suffocating silence of keeping a secret that dark for so many years? What do you think finally made Colin Howell confess? If this deep dive into a dark case held your interest, please do like this video, share it, and subscribe to our channel, Horror Docs. We'll bring you more chilling stories. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.